What is up, you guys, and welcome back. Today I am talking all about manifesting. I named this podcast episode Practical Manifesting because I wanted to talk about the reality of this practice. For the longest time, I was really turned off by the idea of manifesting because I thought it was too out there, I thought it was too woo-woo, and I really didn't have buy-in. And the truth is that it is a little woo-woo, but once you can get over that hump, you really can use it to harness so much creative potential within yourself. If you're not actively engaging in some kind of manifestation process, I would say that you are still living somebody else's life. And so you're being kept from your authenticity. Really, what I talk about, especially in this episode, is that manifesting is just really dreaming up what we want and then bringing it into existence. It's not that far out there. I do, however, talk about the quantum physics aspect of it. If you are interested in that, there are so many good resources. I kind of just brush over it briefly, but there are so many rabbit holes you can go down if that's your jam. And then at the end, I kind of talk about how manifesting is really just calling in the life you want. You get to create it, you dream it up, and then removing the subconscious blocks that prevent you from getting it, doing the shadow work, doing the work that underlie the reasons why you believe you can't have something, aka getting out of your head, which is what this podcast is all about. So I am so pumped for you guys to be here with me. Next time, I'm going to give you a couple of tools that you can use to manifest. There are some that you probably have heard of before, and then some that I kind of bring in that I think can be used in your manifestation practice. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Without further ado, welcome to the Get Out of Your Head podcast, where we talk all about the stories that keep you stuck, blocked from manifesting what you really want, and away from your authentic life. I am your host, Sarah, from Spirit, Mind, Body. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today I'm talking about manifesting. I think in my first episode, I said that I was going to do this episode, and it's just taken a little bit of time. Some other things came up first, and what I have found is that I have to honor what happens, what I'm being inspired to create. And so this is now coming through, and so I'm pretty pumped to do it. I'm really excited to talk about what manifesting means from a very practical standpoint. And I wanted to do this episode because for me, I'm a really practical person. For the longest time, I was really turned off by this idea of manifesting because it just seemed too magical. It seemed too elusive to me. It seemed too fluffy. It was like I just didn't have buy-in. And I think that, something similar happens when we say things like love is all you need. And while that may be true, and while I do believe that, in this physical body right now, it gets really difficult to buy into that because it's almost like it ignores the complexities and the reasons why we don't love all the time. And in the same way, I think that manifesting is almost it was almost too far out there for me. And so I wanted to take this time to kind of go into how I came around to it because I think that it is practical. It is very valuable. It's very useful. And so maybe with buy-in, then we can start to use it a little bit more. The other thing is that I think a lot of us kind of exist in this space where things happen to us. It does sound a little cliche, life happens for you, not to you, all that stuff, but really, what I want us to understand and what I really would like to make clear is that you are the creator of your own reality. No one else is the creator. Nobody else is in charge of your own life except for you. And I think a lot of us miss that mark. As we are children, we get this idea that life sort of just happens to us and that we're almost at the mercy of life instead of us saying what we want and then making that happen. And so really that's it. And I think that as this relates to ego stories or stories that we tell ourselves that keep us blocked, it's almost like we believe our stories so much, and our stories say something like, this is who you are, this is fixed, it's unchanging. And so we forget that we can call in the life that we want and we can take steps to make that happen. And it looks from the outside like work that we have to put in, but really it's not. Really, it's total play. It's dreaming up whatever you can imagine and then making it happen. So in interest of bringing this back down to earth, I just wanted to unpack this word manifesting so that it's not so elusive, so that it's very practical, so that it's a tool that we can use, so that we have buy-in and we start to use it. So I think that manifesting really went mainstream with The Secret. Do you guys, I don't know if you remember that show. Maybe it was like, gosh, it was probably like 10 years ago now when that came out, or maybe even more. But remember The Secret, if you didn't watch it, or even if you did, it was this basically documentary that was all about manifesting and how things come into existence. And The Secret was like, as long as you focus enough on your thoughts and you believe something to happen, then it's gonna happen. It became this wish list. It was like, what do you want? You want to win the lottery? You want a new boat? You just have to focus enough. You have to channel all of your thoughts to making that happen, or to believing that it can happen, and then all of a sudden it will happen. It will come into your existence. And it's really appealing because who doesn't want that? It almost seems like the easy way out. And it's almost sort of this like hands-off approach where it's this mental game that you play and you just sit back and watch the magic happen. I think that is really where it started. And of course, our ego minds love to latch onto that. We love easy, we love free, we love no effort. And so that took hold in the mainstream culture. And then all of a sudden, that's where it took off. And when this secret thing came out, I think a lot of people saw it, and this is where I kind of came from for the longest time, is that it was like a purely physical process, meaning that it had nothing to do with your internal reality. So like, I would just focus my thoughts on making something happen, and then it would just magically show up in my reality. And the thing is that what we have to acknowledge is that it has way more to do with your internal state, your internal reality, than just thinking thoughts and then making something happen. For instance, if I want to win the lottery, I want to have the money because it's going to make me feel a certain way. It's going to make me feel free. It's going to make me feel important. It's going to maybe give me status. Maybe that's what I believe that I'm going to feel. And so when I didn't understand manifesting, I thought that it was basically like I would just focus on my thoughts and then that would bring me the money, instead of focusing on how I wanted to feel. And then it doesn't matter if I have the money because I already feel that way. And I think a lot of us miss this mark. If you listen to this podcast, you were probably raised in the era that I was, where we sort of weren't taught that our feelings were all that important. I got the message when I was a kid, like a lot of kids, that said something like, your internal state really doesn't matter. You just have to act a certain way, and then that's how you fit in. And when you fit in, that's how you become happy and successful and all these things. And we're sort of coming back around to that, and we're kind of tapping into our internal state, and we're realizing that this is really important. But we haven't fully acknowledged this. I think a lot of people come from this mindset of like, well, I just want this. I just want this. I just want this. I want a house. I want a car. I want a new job. I want the love of my life. We want all these things, but we forget why we want them. And why we want them is always because they make us feel a certain way. It's turned around. In the classic manifestation, the way that I learned it initially was that you just have to believe that you're going to get something and then you're going to get it. But now you can turn it around so that you figure out why you want something. What is the feeling that you're after? And then once you find that feeling that you're after, then it doesn't matter what is in your external reality. And then the paradox is that you are going to attract things that would match that feeling. And so that's a big part of what I mean by manifesting. You cultivate how you want to feel first and foremost, and then your external reality follows. And as a side note, I really think that's real freedom. You stop needing people or things in your life. Whenever you need something in your life, you are energetically bound to it. If I'm relying on a company to give me my paycheck, I buy in to giving that company my 40 hours a week or more. Say I want to do something else on my Monday through Friday. Well, I can't because that person's paying a paycheck. So anytime we think we need something from our external reality, we actually bind ourselves to it, and that's not real freedom. And we are always going to be bound to things in our environment, but I think that it's worth figuring out what's worth being bound to and where we would like to detach from it. And so manifesting is sort of a cultivate or grow your own experience. You make these feelings. I feel free first. I feel happy first. I feel important first. I feel belonging first. And then the rest of everything else follows, whatever you want to feel. But again, I feel like most of us we're raised in this era where we aren't taught that it's important to feel what you want to feel. That doesn't really matter. Okay. So when I say manifesting, really what I mean is we just bring things into existence. When we say manifest, it's just taking this energetic component and making it physical. Meaning that I have an idea, which would be sort of the energetic component, and then all of a sudden it becomes real and concrete because I made it so. And I think that this happens in two basic ways. First off, it changes your focus. There have been studies done that there are 1 million different stimuli that we can focus on at any given time, and our brains actually filter out way more than they let in. If you think about how many things you could focus on at any given moment, you could go down to the very smallest level, you could scale up, and the truth is that we end up filtering out what we don't think is important. And so when we manifest or when we engage in this process of cultivating our own feelings, what we start to do is we start to focus on the things that are already in our existence that make us feel that certain way. It's like a positive feedback process. Say I want to feel important, and I start cultivating that feeling in myself first. I focus on feeling important. I figure out what that feels like physically. Does my heart expand? Do I open? Do I puff my chest? I cultivate that feeling of importance and connection. I would say that you want to feel important because you want to feel connection. So maybe that's like the second layer to importance, but so I cultivate that feeling first, and then all of a sudden in my reality, my focus is going to change, and I'm going to start to notice the things that make me feel important. Say my husband compliments me on something, whereas I would have typically brushed that off. Now I'm going to start to be more mindful and notice it a little bit more, and then it just reaffirms the process over and over and over again. So that's the first reason why this works. And then secondly, we literally bring things into existence by manifesting. I'll take a very practical example from my life. I had this idea of how I want my patio to look. And this is all coming together because I dreamt it up, because I had in mind exactly what I wanted it to look like. And then I hired contractors. And then I went out and got the patio furniture to match. We did all these things in order to make the patio that we want. In the same way, I manifested this podcast. So I started to think of what I wanted this podcast to be about, and then I set about making it happen, bringing it into existence. And that is really what we mean by manifesting. Now, there are two parts to that. We can break that down even more. So the first part is non-magical. You realize how you do it. You know that in order to start a podcast, I have to research, I have to find out what I want. There are 1 million blog articles, so you look up the blog articles and then you actually do the things that it takes to start a podcast. The magical part, or the unexplained part, that is another component to this piece. So for instance, when I was starting this podcast, I put in the work. You know, you always have to put in the work. But there were a series of things that sort of lined up for me in order to make that happen. They're coincidental. I happen to have a friend in the podcasting business, Simona Costantini, which, by the way, you should check out her and her podcast if you are interested in starting a podcast at all. This is your girl. But I happen to have a friend who could help me with that, because there are certain things that you're not going to get from an article or a YouTube video. And so having that person with firsthand experience who can speak to your personal issues is like a major leg up in doing anything. And so it just so happened that I knew her and that she was able to help me out. So that is what I mean by there's this practical component and then there's this totally magical component that we can't really explain. It's being at the right place at the right time, synchronistic events that are totally out of our control. We have no idea how they happen. We have no understanding as to why things just sort of pan out for us, but they do at times, and that is the other component. And if you're looking at manifesting and you're like, that's just not practical, you're only considering that part of manifesting. You're only considering that, hands off, the universe sort of hands it to you on a silver platter component, and we ignore the rest of the parts, like I'm changing my focus. That stuff has already been there the entire time, and now all of a sudden I'm paying attention to it, or we're ignoring the fact that we have to put in the work in order for things to happen. So I'm going to shift gears for a minute, and I'm going to go over some of the science as to why this happens. This is quantum physics, quantum reality at its finest, and there are a million different books out there if you are interested in this sort of thing. Joe Dispenza's work is a very good place to start. Becoming supernatural, evolve your brain, breaking the habit of being yourself. You are the placebo. He has so many good books, and that will lead you down a rabbit trail if you want it to so many other books about this kind of stuff. So if you are like me and you need just proof and evidence and you really want to get into it, that's a perfect place to start. But I just really wanted to quickly brush over this because it's important, and I think that we don't do a good job of talking about this. So bear with me if science isn't really your thing. I will try to break it down as easily and clearly as possible. So when we talk about quantum physics, we're talking about the very smallest things in the entire world, the smallest things that we know of. And there's a lot that we don't know, but this is the study of the smallest elements of matter. I think most of us have learned in high school, somewhere around there, that everything is made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. And then matter can be broken down even further. Neutrons and protons can actually go down to elementary particles, and technically an electron is already an elementary particle, which basically just means that they can be broken down even smaller and smaller and smaller. And so that's what we're talking about is elementary particles. And these elementary particles, you might have known them as a gluon, a Higgs boson. Maybe you've heard of that. If not, no worries. All it means is that these are the smallest things that we know of. And when you look at these things, they behave very, very strangely. I'm just going to stick with an electron, but these elementary particles all kind of take on a similar property. So when I say electron, what I really mean is elementary particles. You can just kind of make that assumption. So when we look at an electron, it has what is called wave-particle duality. So that means that it looks like it's energy, and then sometimes it also looks like it's physical. And so we could say, well, which one is it? Is it energy or is it physical? And the truth is that it's energy until we look at it and then it becomes physical. And so it's sort of both. And the very interesting thing about this is that when we go looking for this electron, it just happens to be in the exact place that we look for it. Every time, wherever we believe it's going to be, it all of a sudden manifests or it becomes physical reality where we look for it. And all other times, it exists as energy. And so when we look at this, when we scale it up into our actual lives, we can kind of deduce that maybe there is some physical and energetic component to us as well. And just as a side note, the energetic components would be things like auras in the spiritual world, or your chakras. These are your energy centers. You are energetic. You put off this energy. You're not just a physical being. You are more than that. And this is what I think that the energy part of us, the energetic part of us, is more our spiritual side, and then the physical part of us is like our ego side. That's the way that I see it. That's my very own conclusion. And so coming back to manifesting, what we believe is going to happen is probably going to happen. And this sort of gets kind of hard to pin down though sometimes, because our beliefs are shaped by so many different things. We have our conscious beliefs that maybe take up 10% of our total amount of beliefs. And then the rest of them are subconscious. So that's why I focus so much on shadow or the subconscious, because 90% of our beliefs are being shaped by things that we don't even realize we're thinking. And so if we can find what is in our subconscious, we can sort of harness that, or bring these subconscious beliefs up to surface so we can look at them and either change them or evaluate them or make them work for us, for our conscious mind. If you believe that you're not going to have enough money to buy a house, you're probably not going to have enough money to buy a house. If you believe that you are meant to go to work and hate your job, well, then you're not going to like your job. If you believe you're in the best marriage in the entire world, you're going to be in the best marriage of your entire world. Whatever you believe is what you're going to experience. And again, I would say that it's because our beliefs shape our focus. In your marriage or in your relationships, you can look at all the good things or you can look at all the negative things. They're both there. It just depends on what you focus on. And then from there, we start to say, if I believe I'm in the best marriage of my life, I'm going to do things that would align with that belief. When we talk about manifesting, really what we do is we align our thoughts and our beliefs to happen before the actual event happens. There's a lot of really cool proof. Maybe you've heard of these experiments before where like basketball players would practice free throws in their minds on the side of the bench. And then another group would practice actual free throws, and turns out that their free throw rates go up the same amount. The people who practiced it in their mind basically had the same advantage of the people who were actually practicing free throws. Same thing with practicing piano. When you practice things in your mind first, you rehearse them in your mind, you actually get better at piano, and you don't actually have to practice the piano physically. So I think that that's really compelling evidence that these sort of things can work. They definitely happen. And if you're not practicing manifesting or manifesting techniques, I think it's huge, and it's it's untapped potential within yourself. When you dream something up and then it comes into your existence, that is called manifesting. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. It just becomes more magical when you don't know how it happens, aka the circumstances just happen to line up. But it's also just as valid if we do know how it happens. It doesn't mean that it's not remarkable because we put in the work in order to make it happen. Also, why does it matter? If I put in the work to get what I want, but then at the end of the day I have it, why does it matter if the universe gave it to me or if I made it happen? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to shift gears again, and we're going to talk about there's two components to manifesting when I'm talking about the actual act of manifesting. So I went from big picture, how does it work? What does it really mean? And now I'm honing in on when you're sitting, when you decide, okay, I'm going to start implementing this practice in my life, what are you doing? So there's two components. First off, you're calling in what you want. You're dreaming it up. You're creating it in your mind first. And then secondly, you're removing subconscious blocks that prevent you from getting it. For example, when I am manifesting the house that I want, I'm dreaming it up. I'm thinking about what I want it to look like, how I want it to feel. I think about all of the details of it. And then I go in and I say, okay, well, where am I telling myself that I can't have that, or that's not practical for me? Where am I putting my own limitations on it? If I want a tree house, but I think that tree houses only exist in the rainforest and I have to live in the rainforest for that to happen, where am I telling myself that I can't have a tree house here in, Wyoming? And we do this all the time. We put our own limitations on what we can and can't have because we think that there's rules because that's what everybody else told us. But uncovering subconscious blocks are all about breaking through those barriers. They're all about busting through that self-imposed limitation that we thought existed, but it actually doesn't exist. And the most important thing about all of this is to figure out how we feel about it. I come back to this. You want anything because you want it to make you feel a certain way. And so when you feel that certain way first, you're relying on your own power source, your own imagination, creativity, connection to source. You're relying on yourself to make things happen. You cultivate these feelings within yourself in order to make yourself feel the way that you want to feel, and then the rest plays out the way that it plays out. And usually, and maybe that's the magical part, is that usually when the rest plays out and you don't know how it happens, it ends up being better than what you imagined. It ends up being better than what your ego mind could have come up with. And so when it comes to living the life that we want, I think that a lot of us stay stuck because we don't think that we have any other option. To come full circle, we haven't been taught, or maybe some of us haven't even figured out, that we are able to call in the life that we want, that we can have whatever we want. We're almost victims to our reality. I hear a lot of people say, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want to do that, I don't want to eat here. But we are really bad at being like, this is what I do want. We say, I don't want to feel like this about my job, but we don't actively say, I want to feel like this about my job. And that's where the work comes in, is like calling in what you actually want. And when you start doing that, when you start calling in that reality, that's when everything gets exactly the way that you want it. And that's where you realize that you are your own power source and you don't need anything else in your reality to happen in order to feel the way you want to feel. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Next time, I'm going to talk about the tools that you can put into your toolbox in order to manifest. I am hoping to dive a little bit deeper because there are 1,000 books out there that'll tell you how to manifest, and usually they rely on affirmations, feeling a certain way, but I think that there are really more tools that we've kind of been missing out. So stay tuned for that. It'll be part 2. Manifesting. I'm not really sure what I'm going to call it yet. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, you guys. I hope that you have an awesome rest of your day. If you enjoyed this episode, I would invite you to subscribe, share it with someone you know, and leave an honest rating or review. You can also connect with me through Instagram at spiritmind.body, through YouTube, or my website. Links to all of these can be found in the show notes below. This work is not easy and requires tremendous self-reflection, grit, and a willingness to be misunderstood, and for that, I honor every single one of you for showing up for your authentic self. Until next time.